Hey guys, I'm probably going to do a little short mini-series specifically based on the JQ as it pertains to today. Basically, what I'm going to be doing is researching the Jewish texts right after AD, after death, or how they like to use the Common Era. The reason for this is because, as you can see from today's culture, there's a lot of criticism about the truth regarding the JQ, and specifically who these actors are, what they believe, specifically about us, God, and everyone else, and how that represents itself in the world from a hierarchical structure. But anyway, so I wanted to read just a slight introduction into Jewish mysticism, the Kabbalah. This is a book that contains a lot of esoteric spirituality, specifically surrounding Judaism, but more particularly the esoteric spiritual side of that they've kind of tried to collaborate into this one text called the Kabbalah. The text itself was made in the medieval period, but it was essentially put together around that time. Before that, they had manuscripts that contained a lot of this secrecy, scandal, and information about the soul. But as you know, the Talmud has some very terrible things in it as well, specifically about Gentiles. So I'm going to go ahead and read a little introduction from the Kabbalah so that we can kind of understand that together, and I'm just going to essentially speak on some things as they pop out to me. So let's get started. The essence of Kabbalah is the quest to understand how the divine will conceived, created, and maintains the universe, to use that understanding to draw closer to the unknowable source of all, and ultimately to restore the flawed cosmos to its original perfection, that moment when God first said, "Let there be light," but also intellectualizing the moments just before the words were spoken. You'll find that these Jewish mystics are going to intellectualize everything, and these earliest mystics use psychedelics to do it. But of course, it's far more complicated than that. This book tells the story of Kabbalah's origins, its development, and spread from its earliest beginnings until the present day. Exactly when those earliest beginnings were is not so easy to pinpoint. Our story begins in the first centuries of the Common Era, or after death, as Christians would say, or anyone else for that matter, with a group of Jewish mystics whose curiosity about the nature of heaven inspired them to embark on mystical voyages of discovery. Key phrase for psychedelics. We do not know the names of these people, nor where they lived, but we do have some of the literature they left behind. Sunk deep into meditative trances, they constructed elaborate travelogues of their visits to heaven, describing in detail the architecture and layout of the Empyrean palaces and halls, cataloging the dangers waiting to entrap the unwary traveler, and extolling the delights awaiting those who deserve them. So essentially speaking towards unearned wisdom, putting yourself in that place and getting what you do not deserve. They knew the names of the angels, categorizing them according to their various ranks and hierarchies. So again, this is also medieval Judaism, where you have these Jewish mystics at the time literally intellectualizing an angel hierarchy. Like, we don't have that as concrete fact, but that's why you have people today claiming, yeah, the Ophanim is up here, and then under him is the seraphim, and then you have the archangels, and then you have the cherubim. It's like, and then you have the malach. It's like, that whole entire hierarchical system of angels came from these esoteric studies from these Jewish mystics in the medieval period. So categorizing their various ranks and hierarchies brought back tales about their complaints and rebellions, and learned to sing their songs and adulations, talking about the rebellions in heaven, the original rebellions before Adam and Eve. The heaven they describe, its awesome majesty and teeming host, appears little different from the court of an ancient oriental potentate. Heaven in their imagination was the idealized paradigm of an earthly seat of power, splendor, and glory. The heavenly voyagers hewed pathways along which the initiate might travel. There's that key word, initiate. You'll find that in Jewish mystical texts, they use the word initiate. There's a previous book that I read maybe 4 years ago now called the Kabbalah, not the Kabbalah, but they use the term initiate, and they claim that the author is 3 initiates. Interestingly enough, right? So here we have them mentioning the initiate might travel to experience celestial bliss, but for later generations, experiences rhapsodized by enchanted minds were not enough. It was illuminating to know that through the use of meditations, incantations, and body contortions, and with body contortions, they're talking about the darker side of yoga, for example, like Kundalini yoga, dark spiritual stuff. One could experience the sublime, that through the use of such techniques, one might attain mystical communion with God and his angels. You might get mystical communion with somebody, bud, but it's not God. But utopian delight is not intellectually satisfying. Here we go to the Jewish ideal. It is not intellectually satisfying. Human curiosity demands more. The intellectual component arrived in the form of a book that set out in complex and impenetrable detail the numinous tools and techniques used by the Almighty to create the world. So again, here we are with these mystical Jews that are trying to intellectualize the divine creation that God put in place. You can see where things start to fall through the cracks and where darkness starts to set in. Written in Hebrew, the Book of Formation is a strange, terse, almost haunting work, impossible to understand when read literally. It created a mystical vocabulary for the first time, and a quasi-scientific, interconnected way of understanding how, in the eyes of its unknown author, the cosmos was formed. It was all to do with language and numbers. And again, they're speaking specifically to the language and numbers denoted in Proto-Hebrew. These are symbols that have a pictographic, numerical, and phonetic language, and this was the language in the 12th and 13th century and prior that Moses would have spoken. So even the rabbis say that the 10 Commandments on the stone tablets were in a form of Proto-Hebrew, and it went through several different forms of Proto-Hebrew. But that, for example, is a Proto-Hebrew word for God, Yod-He Vav-He, but with Hebrew, it is read from right to left, not left to right. Let me see. Dang, I lost my place. Here we are. The Book of Formation's laconic hints were developed and expanded by different schools of mystics, philosophers, and putative scientists over the succeeding centuries. By the time the threads were drawn together in 12th century Provence, the principles of Kabbalah were established. So, prior to the establishment of this text, they were all manuscripts, recorded manuscripts by these Jewish mystics that they finally compiled into this text. Now again, this is the mystical side of the text, while the Talmud encompasses a lot of ethics, history, and culture that you'll find out about the Jews and what they have to say about everything, to include sex, Gentiles, and so on. And we have seen all of the degeneracy from the Talmud in recent time. That's partly the motivation for some of this debate. One only has to read the first chapter of Genesis to know that God commanded the world into being. Let there be light. And the first thing he said, and sure enough, there was light. The world was created through God's speech, Hebrew speech. For that is the language of the book of Genesis. That is the language of angels and men, quite literally, denoted as the language of angels and men, Proto-Hebrew. So back when the earliest humans, the antediluvian human beings, were receiving wisdom they did not yet deserve, much like the wisdom these initiates did not deserve when in the trance, these humans received wisdom from fallen angels. The fallen angels that descended upon Mount Hermon gave them wisdoms about metallurgy, how to make breastplates, weapons of war like swords. For females, they showed the wisdoms of makeup and a whole bunch of things that humans were not yet ready for. But that's what they're talking about with this language. I have a bunch of early videos where I'm talking about how profound this language is. It's truly, if I didn't believe in God, I would say it's truly magical. But this language is prophetic. Some of my earliest videos, I showed how this language was prophesying and predicting the coming of Jesus Christ. I used it to prove God, but I also used it to prove Jesus Christ is God. in some of my earliest videos that you can look at. So do not do not think twice about this language. Look into it yourself, but it is very profound, truly. For that is the language of the book of Genesis. Speech is composed of words, and words are made from letters. Letters, specifically Hebrew letters, are therefore the basic tools of creation. The discovery that the alphabet is the foundation of the material world was as important to mystics at the end of the first millennium as was the discovery of DNA. Think spelling. Where does spelling's root come from? It comes from spell, like casting a spell, but they're denoting the power of words. DNA's centrality to life for scientists 1,000 years later. Letters are the building blocks of the cosmos. And like all building blocks, letters can be arranged, jumbled, and rearranged. When they are arranged in a certain order, they appear as the text of the Bible. Just like the three words in the beginning, but in Hebrew, one word, Bereshit, which is one in three parts, right? Interestingly enough, Bereshit in Proto-Hebrew literally shows a prophetic timeline from the very beginning all the way to Jesus' sacrifice on the cross, using all of those the numerically symbolic, phonetic, and numerical symbols that show a timeline, a prophetic timeline of Jesus' path from the beginning all the way to the cross. It's absolutely profound. I have a video of that. I encourage you to go check it out, because that, again, is proof, evidence, in my view, that is not needed. Faith alone is needed. But nonetheless, this language proves that Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Carrying on, within this text, the mysteries of the world's creation are all encoded by manipulating and rearranging the letters of Scripture. Kabbalah aims to decode and make clear the divine mysteries. So I'm going to stop it there. Essentially, what I'm trying to do is research the current issue with the JQ of today's time, which is, are these God's chosen people, or are they something else? Is this just the fulfillment of an ancient covenant that God made with Abraham? Because again, God promised Abraham that he would continue his seed, but he did not promise a spiritual people. God promised Abraham the continuation of the Jewish people, and he promised them the return to Israel, their own state. That prophecy has been fulfilled right after World War II with Israel, and we are seeing the continuation of their line today. But they are not, by any means, Jesus' chosen, as we see them today, because they are influenced by the Talmud. They are influenced by the Kabbalah. So in researching this, I'm hoping to gather exactly who we're dealing with when we talk about the intellectualized, true Jewish members of our society that influence a lot of what's going on in politics, probably influencing people like Ben Shapiro behind the scenes. So if you're interested in some of this information, again, this is a non-biblical text. This is solely what modern Jews believe, at least those that are intellectually based into their religion. If you're into discovering truth as adamantly as I am, like and subscribe, and let's get into it. Also, guys, don't forget to pick up a Christ flag from pgapg.store in the style of the Gonfalon, which is the assaulting flag of the Catholic Orthodox armies. I also have an Orthodox tactical patch that you can pick up as well. Thanks.